Okay, so we talked about the behavior, your brain a little bit, and how your emotions are set based upon their particular intensity. And now we're going to talk about what moves you. What do you desire? So what we want and what we do are not necessarily the same thing. Okay, and that's what we're going to find out. So we all have 7 what we will call motivators. Sometimes I call them attitudes, and they are on your graph, and that's those 7 lines. Okay? Now, on those 7 lines, there's a box on each line with a line through it. That's the national norm, 1 standard deviation above and 1 below, which is 68% of the population. So 7 out of 10 people are in the box. Okay? So what matters is how far away from you from the box are you, up or down? Down means one thing, up means an entirely different thing. So don't think of up as good and down as bad or something like that. But they just mean different things. But these are the motivators. So this is what they look like. There's the aesthetic, the economic, the individualistic, the political, altruistic, regulatory, and theoretical. These are mindsets that encompass areas of interest in your life. They're what you value in the world. And what you value, you will tend to put more weight into it, place more importance on it, and tend to go after it. Okay? So let's look at the aesthetic. I call it an attractor because this attitude in you will actually start attracting things to you in the world. It's like a magnet. So the main motivation in this driver is the strong desire and need to achieve equilibrium between the world around us and the world within us. In other words, people that typically are very high on aesthetic don't live to work as much as they work to live. Okay? They're looking to create a sustainable work-life balance. They believe balance is the key to life. They want to live a balanced life. They tend to be creative, imaginative, arty, mystical, expressive. This style may redefine and resist real-world approaches to current challenges. In other words, you might take the long way home simply because it's a better-looking drive. Because you're attracted to the beauty of the route. And so that is something that has value, so you find yourself more drawn to that type of a route. So higher aesthetic impulses will cause you to want to feel what you're feeling and experience life rather than just live life. So when you're highly aesthetic minded, depending upon how high the intensity is, if you're in the box and above the line, you're above average. If you're out of the box, above the box, then you're becoming, more in tune to this side of you. And if you get really high, meaning 65, 70, 80, up in that realm, there's less people like this around you, so you feel misunderstood. Because there's not a lot of people that think this way, are drawn to things like this. So it doesn't make you good or bad, it just makes you less of you, less people like you around, that's all. The economic attractor. This attractor examines the motivation for security from self-interest, economic gain, about achieving real world returns on everything you personally set your hand to or your ventures. So people that are higher on the economic line are always asking themselves this question: what am I getting out of this? And if they're not getting enough out of it, they're not likely to do it because they have a desire to gain from the involvement with their brain, their involvement with their hands, their resources, their finances. If I'm putting into this, I'm going to want to get something out or I'm not doing it. So the higher that goes, the more powerful the need to achieve becomes. If you're really low on this line, so you're not going to be an achiever as much as you're going to be a receiver. Hey, we got this extra car, would you like it? That happens to lower economically minded people. Typically because they tend to be altruists and they're always giving. And if you've ever studied King Solomon, he used to say, if you cast your bread upon the water, over time it'll return upon the waves. In other words, you reap what you sow in life. So what goes out tends to come back. So that's why givers typically gain, as a rule. So the preferred approach of this attractor is both a personal and professional one with a focus on ultimate outcomes. In other words, business-minded, focusing on growing, building an empire even. So people with personal empires, will have a higher economic attractor in their life. That doesn't mean you're greedy. See, don't ever confuse self-interest with selfish, because they're not the same. Self-interest is the type of common sense we use when we're on an airplane and we take the oxygen mask and put it on ourselves first and then on the children. Because if I put it on myself first and I'm alive, the kids have a better chance. So there are people that are very high altruistically driven that look at that and think there's something wrong with this picture. How come we're not helping out the children? They're not thinking, they're feeling. So it's an altruistic feeling, but common sense dictates that we must put it on the adults first because we're the responsible people. And then what's responsible mean? Response, able to respond. A child can't respond in a situation like a plane crash, but an adult can. Individualistic attractor. It deals with the need to be seen as autonomous, unique, different, independent, standing out from others. I always call this the red penny. So if you're a penny in a jar of pennies, then you want to stand out. You have unique ideas that you believe are worth something. And you may want to place them in an open forum to be heard. Okay? If you're really low on this line, then you're happy to hang back and not put yourself forward, present your own ideas, and be seen as unique in the world. Some people don't need that. They're not drawn to that. They don't value it. This is the drive to be socially independent and have opportunity for freedom and personal expression. So people that are high on the individualistic attractor and have that high value of individualism want freedom and autonomy to do their own thing in the world. Some people are just like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And they're really good with that, and we need those people. The political attractor, being seen as a leader and to have influence and control over one's own environment and one's own success. Competitiveness and control is often associated with those scoring high on this motivation. So I'm motivated to take charge. I have a desire to take charge. Some people want to be in charge because this line is high, but they're low dominant, so they never take charge. That's a me conflict. I want to be in charge, but I don't take charge. That's like thinking, I don't get in the car unless I'm driving. But then when you get up to the car, there's somebody in the driver's seat, so you just sit in the back. So the whole time you drive, you're going down the road, you're thinking, I wish I was in the front seat, but I'm not. Because you don't have dominance, and maybe because you're a steady, so it's not safe. What if he says no? I don't know what's going to happen. So you're less determined and more content. And I call this easily contented. It doesn't mean you don't think about it. What it does mean is you won't do anything about it. Like Luke. Luke Skywalker wants to be a Jedi, but he does nothing about it. Until circumstances, put him into crisis, and he starts feeling more confident. His confidence was built by Obi-Wan Kenobi, who started telling him things about his father, about his past that he never knew, started to build confidence. Confidence can be built in an individual, and it will actually change their pattern over time. Because if you follow the Star Wars series, not that it's real, but it's like real life when you think about these things happening that way. Luke, in the end, becomes a Jedi master. And when he walks in, everybody's like at attention. But even so, he's still a nice guy. You see, he's never Vader. He's not that, he's got confidence, not meanness, not overly direct. He doesn't have that. But he's got new confidence because it was built in him. Here's an interesting thing. The word crisis. The Hebrew word for crisis is actually a root word from the word birthing stool. So 3,000 years ago, women would get upon a birthing stool to give birth to a child, to bring life into the world through crisis. If you've ever seen a woman have a baby like I have, it's a crisis. Okay? And through that crisis, you either bring life in or you don't. It's breached. It's like an emergency. Crisis can go one way or the other way. When you have crisis in your life, are you going to birth something new or are you going to breach? When crisis happens, because it happens to all of us. And what we do in crisis determines what's birthed in our life through that crisis. It's all our decision. The altruistic attractor. It's an expression of the need or energy to benefit others at the expense of self. When this line is high, I must help you, but it must cost me something. When this line is low, can you help me at your own expense? So that's the guy calling collect. Lower altruistic. Okay? So everybody's different. When you have a lower altruistic value, you value what you have and will see it as what you earned at the expense of anything or anyone else around you. Does that mean you're a terrible person? No, it has nothing to do with that. This is not a moral decision. This is something you're just attracted to. People that are lower on this line are more guarded, they're more suspicious, and they see other people as a threat. People like Mother Teresa, she's in bombed out craters kissing lepers while all the other people that are over there supposedly doing humanitarian work are running for their lives. And she stays. She's gone now. She was on the 6th or 7th page of the paper in a little article about that big when she died, which shows you where the country is on altruism. So this is a genuine sincerity about helping other people. But sometimes higher altruistic mindsets can actually come from feelings of low self-worth. So therefore, I view everybody as more important than I view myself. Because as human beings, we typically spend time on what we believe is important. And a lot of times, you can get a very high altruistic mindset, a very high patient steady style, very low dominant style, low economic, low political, nothing about me, all about everybody else because you don't believe you're important. And then maybe, just maybe, if you're that way, you need to start thinking about your importance in the world and what you're bringing to the table, because some people overlook themselves because they just don't feel that worth. So sometimes this can be tricky. Sometimes people, because they're very giving, they're very benevolent, every time you ask them for help, they're there. That might not be coming from the place of virtue you think. It could be coming from low self-worth in that individual, and they believe in their mind they're earning points with the universe the more they do for others at the expense of self, and it can get exhausting. And then later in life, they start resenting the people they love because they feel taken advantage of, and they actually created it themselves. It's very hard to say no if you're highly altruistically driven. Because if you're saying, I can't, your brain turns it around to feeling like you're saying, I won't. And that just sounds bad. The regulatory attractor. It's the need to establish order, routine, structure. Okay? This is a trait that comes with authoritarianism. Okay? Authoritarianism is a mindset that comes with establishing order, routine within social groups, and not wanting social change to come in and disrupt an apple cart. And so if you're watching the political landscape right now, the GOP, the Grand Old Party, is experiencing a major shift in their thinking as a social group. Because you've got authoritarianism in there, where people think structure, order. These are the black and white thinkers. Either or. They don't think in terms of both and, they think in terms of either or. It's either right or wrong. So ultra-conservatism as a mindset typically are high regulatory thinkers. Now, if you haven't noticed, what people do in the world is they look for like-minded individuals, get together to create solidarity. The bigger our group, the more right we become. And this is what people groups do. People groups build and build and build for uniqueness, for solidarity, for problem solving, for living in social structure so that things can get done and we don't just all kill each other. So we create groups around our ideas and the way we think and what we, quote, believe. We create all these groups. And what happens is right now in the world, you've got in America, you've got this other mindset where it's a more of a socially minded landscape where healthcare should be for everyone. Why should I pay for your healthcare when you could pay for your own, but you're just not, you lazy slob? That's authoritarianism. And then other people thinking, they may not be able to, they don't have the money, we should be helping, everybody should be doing their part. That's more of a socialist mindset. And I'm not talking about socialism in a negative sense. I'm talking about people that believe we're all here to help one another and we're in this together. Okay, so you got these two landscapes playing out. And it's really, this is really the crux, because these people that don't want to budge, they're like Judge Judy in their thinking. They're just waiting for you to finish so they can drop the gavel and say no. And that's how they think. They're very black and white thinkers. The motivation is to promote a black and white mindset and a traditional approach to problems and challenges through standards, rules, and protocols. You've heard the Outback commercial, no rules, just right. That flies in the face of regulatory thinking. Sometimes this line, this emotion, this need is called traditional, where we stick with what we know works and we never veer from it because it's safe. And it defines us. So a lot of people are defined by an idea. Their definition comes from this idea. If this idea is upset, then who am I? Who have I become? And so we will fight to the death for what we believe if what we believe defines us. And no matter what you believe, if it defines you, you will die for that as a rule. And typically that comes from black and white thinking. If this is really low, then you think to each his own. Whatever. Well, I'm pouring grease down my sink. Well, I don't care. That's your sink. Just don't pour it down mine. But a very high regulatory thinker thinking they shouldn't be pouring grease down the thing. I'm going to talk to that neighbor. So not am I only controlling my sink, I'm going to control your sink. So very high regulatory thinkers create regulations that are good for themselves, but they hold everybody else to it. They hold everybody else to their own standard of thinking as a rule. Okay? Now, this has to get really high to get into some of the areas where I'm talking about where it's almost sounding like, wow, 70, 80. It's very rare when you see it that high. But there still are veins of this kind of thinking that can run through people, even though it's not super high. Theoretical Attractor. The desire to uncover, discover, and recover the truth. So Stephen Hawking's been in the search for the theory of everything his whole life, and he's not going to give up until he finds it. He's got to find the truth. This need to gain knowledge for knowledge's sake is a result of an itchy brain. Some people's brains are itchy. The only way to scratch an itchy brain is to learn something you never knew before. So you might go on a How It's Made binge on Saturday, or you may watch the History Channel, or you will watch things that instruct you because you'd rather be taught than entertained. This typically is a higher theoretical mindset. If you're average or below average, then you cease to know everything, you just want to know something. Those are the people that cram for the exam. Okay? So the exam's on Friday, all week long they're goofing off with their friends. Thursday night they put in 3 hours, get up in the morning, they get a B+. But if I sprung that exam on you in 3 weeks but didn't tell you I was going to do it, you'd fail it. Because you only learned what you need to get through and then you stop. But people that are very highly theoretically minded are reading books on fluid mechanics at night after they get out of school. Because their brain loves to learn. So I don't want you to think if your theoretical line's low, it doesn't mean you're smart. It means you likely have a different kind of smart. You could have a creative smart. You could have an intuitive smart. But you may not have a book smart because you have a street smart. So life becomes your school. And sometimes we call that, I've been through the school of hard knocks. Our desires do not always translate into our actions. So what we want isn't always what we do. Now here's what's interesting. Your behavior most of the time will trump your desire. In other words, I desire a raise, but you never ask for one. Because your S is high, your D is low, your C is higher. What if they say no? I wonder if I'm asking too much. You got that little cricket sitting on your shoulder, always second guessing you. Are you sure you want to do that? You sure they're going to think you're stupid? And that's that S kicking up, wanting you to play it safe. You see? And so we all come in and go out of that here and there in our lives, but some people live there, some people visit. So some of our values support one another. Creative attitudes support each other, leading to a higher degree of the need to be creative. So if your individualistic is high and your aesthetic is high, they create a supportive network in your thinking. Independence, freedom, autonomy, and self-expression. So this can create this need to be creative, to be out of the box, to be alternative in your thinking. If you're above 70, you could be a vegetarian. The odds are really good. Because you're thinking of eating in alternative ways to the status quo. Because you're standing out and you're seeing yourself as unique and you're experimental. So if you're a high theoretical and a high aesthetic, you become an experimenter. So teenagers that are very high aesthetic, very high theoretical, they'll experiment. They will, because they're looking for an alternative experience. There's things they will try as a rule. Does that mean everybody with that line does that? No, it means most of them do. So these lines can be supportive of one another. Opposite intensities also support a desire. Low altruistic, high economic. I'm going to get mine. I'm going to, I got to get this. And, I got to save my own money. I can't help you with yours right now because I got to get this car. You see, so lower altruistic, so I'm supporting myself, not you right now. Your time will come. And I have this high need to be self-sufficient in my economic line. So these start supporting, even if they're opposites, they create a supportive network. A desire to help and support others along with feeling content to be behind the scene will ensure a stronger benevolence. So if your altruism is really high and your individualistic is low, you're not the red penny. You want someone else to be the red penny. So you will work hard to elevate others at personal expense because you don't need to be in the, quote, spotlight because you're not an individualist. So if your individualism is low, you can be happy to be behind the scenes and not think, oh, they said they did that. I actually helped on that. I got some of that credit, right? That's how a higher individualistic might think, whereas a low individualistic doesn't need the credit. But we all win. That's how they think. To do one or the other isn't bad or good. It's just where your brain goes. It's just what matters to you in the world. Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. Where's your mom? Oscar Wilde. A desire for freedom and autonomy will be supported by a need to march to the beat of our own drum. Low regulatory. Don't tell me what to do. I'm not a black and white thinker. I think in terms of gray. So gray thinkers think both and, not either or. Well, we could do that, or we could do that, or does anybody else have any ideas? That's low regulatory. High regulatory, we're doing this. Well, I want to do, no, we're not doing that, we're doing this. If you're a D, you see what can happen? Yeah. So where do they find their jobs? Principals of schools, military sergeants, gunnery sergeants, high regulatory, high dominant, high political, sit up, shut up, sit down. They like that because it works for them. So they look for situations and circumstances to allow them to be that without everybody going freaking out over it. You go into the military, they'll cuss you up one side, down the other, scream at you, call you a girl if you're a boy, and all this crazy stuff, and you expect it. I mean, it's the way that is. So there's certain people that fit right in that. People in the police force sometimes are like this. They take matters into their own hands. You see, they like that. There was a show on, must have been the 80s, called Hill Street Blues. Okay? It was a police show. There was one guy there, and I'll never forget it. He was the undercover cop that looked like a street bum. He had a half shaven all the time. He's picking boiled eggs out of a mason jar and eating them for lunch, and it looked like vomit. And he was just this grungy, and he wore this old knit cap, and he just had this character. Super low regulatory, and he pulls a gun on the guy he's trying to capture, and he goes, "Give me a reason, like I want to shoot you so bad." Like that was his character. But you could see, very high dominant, very low compliant, low C, jump off, build his wings on the way down, kind of a guy. But he took a job where he could express what he valued and get away with it, okay? Now, what's interesting, there can be sociopathic tendencies in people. That doesn't mean you're a serial killer. It means there are people that have this ability to mask and put their emotions away like a box in the basement and just never go down there. And so they can say very hard things, do hard things. That's the person who's got a dog, it's 12 years old, and it's kind of limping around, and it's going to die, and it's $600 to fix it, and he doesn't have a ton of money, so he shoots it. He digs a hole in the backyard and puts it in there and goes, "See you later, Ralph," and he goes and has a Starbucks. Okay? There's people all over the world that can do that. I've worked with them, and I've talked to them about it. And so very, very powerful. So when they're dealing with other people, they have this thickness about them, and they don't recognize thinness in other people because they don't have it in themselves, so they don't know what it is. And so they could say very hard and difficult things, like Steve Jobs was that way. So people were afraid to get on the elevator with him because they thought by the time they got to the 5th floor, they wouldn't have a job. And so they steered clear of him. And even now, after his death and after, mourning the loss and so forth, the air is starting to clear a little bit. The stories are starting to come out. How difficult a person he was to work with. Why? He had sociopathic tendencies, which means he could fire you even if you were his friend, and it wouldn't bother him. We got bigger things to do than you. And did it. That's just the way he was. Good or bad? Well, it's indifferent. So you got to be careful. You're not tacking onto people's behavior your value system. You have to wonder, where are they coming from? Why do they think this way? I've profiled people before in companies. I sit down with them, I look at them and say, you look like you were raised by wolves. And they just look at me and like I was. The dad was a wolf. And they survived their childhood. They didn't thrive the childhood. They survived it. And they come into the world as survivors. Well, a dominant person who's a survivor is over-controlling of the environment. But a dominant person who's a thriver creates in their environment. An influencer, a high I people person who's a survivor in life will manipulate and seduce people like a used car salesman. But a person who's an I that's a thriver becomes a leader and pulls people up and makes people's life better and puts in rather than taking out when no one's looking, because they're survivors. They're used to stealing food to live, and so they do that to other people. So whether we survive or thrive completely can change the entire profile. A desire to be in charge of your own life and destiny with a strong need to do it the right way, high regulatory, can translate into very powerful need to control others. So these are the kind of people that might sign up for the police force. They believe, here's how it's done, and we're going to enforce it. So high political, high regulatory, D people become enforcers. They enforce the rules. They don't just dish them out. They give the 10 commandments, not the 10 invitations. Like you put a sermon out there trying to give the 10 invitations, they keep giving you a warning. They never write you a ticket. Well, okay, this time I'll let you go. I've run into those people. And then there was this one cop in Florida. I did a rolling stop, and I saw the lights go on. I don't know where, it's like he materialized, right? I don't know where he came from. You ever have that happen? Like, where did that guy come from? And he pulls over, and I roll down the window. He walks up to my car. I said, hi, officer. He goes, shut up. That's him. Right there. I said, yes, sir. And then did what he said, and that was the end of that. And he was never nice. He controlled the situation. It was his way or the highway. Period. No questions asked. So he got a job where he got to do that every day and experience what he valued, which was controlling the lives of others. So he was a survivor. He probably survived high school. So you can see now how these graphs come together and can work off each other. So what you value, what you desire, what's important to you versus how you think, your emotions. So if you're a high dominant and a high political, you become an authoritarian. And not in a sense of authoritarianism, but one who is in control and in authority, because high political mindsets need to be in charge. We call that large and in charge if it's really high like that. So in control. And then high dominant, I take no prisoners because all these other emotions are not in play. So I don't need you to like me. Low I. High influence, I want you to like me. Low influence, I don't care if you like me. Hillary Clinton. Low I, high D. Bill Clinton. High D, high I. So Bill Clinton is an influencer. And it doesn't matter how much somebody hates Bill Clinton, if they get in an elevator with him, by the time they get to the 5th floor, they're doing selfies. Because he's a charming, influencing style. I know people that didn't like him and were in an elevator with him and sent me the photos. He's amazing. Yep. He's an influencer. So that's how you convince half a country there's 2 definitions to the word is. You're an influencer. It's magic. And he's a low C, big risk taker. Monica, can I see my office for a minute? He's not thinking, he's feeling. He's not a thinker. George W. Bush, Joe Biden. Who wants to give Joe Biden a microphone? We don't know what he's going to do. Low compliant. See? Barack Obama, we know exactly what he's going to do. But if you move his teleprompter away from him, he can't finish the speech because he lost his roadmap. If you pull the teleprompter away from Bill Clinton, the speech gets better. Now I don't have to follow that nonsense. I can say the speech I wanted to give. Independent, high individualistic, red penny. Once you understand how all this works, you can find it and pick it out all over the world and make sense of it. Here's another one. The Good Samaritan. Helper, high S, helping line. Servant, style. Low dominant. Difficult time saying no. Low influence, likely doubts self. High altruism, others before me. Creative, low political, low economic, not what I want, what do you want? That's the Good Samaritan, that's the helper. That's Mother Teresa. That's Oprah Winfrey. That's a giver, giving style. The more our work aligns with our desires, the better we feel. See, when I painted houses for 18 years, I say I had my own business, but people called me on the phone and I went and painted their house. That's about the extent of it. I didn't have a building, an office really. I had a home office and I had a van. That's it. And I always had somebody I paid to help me. And I always ended up counseling them the whole time. Sometimes we'd be in this van for 3 hours before work and they're crying and I'm helping with their marriage troubles. So I was always doing what I was, and I painted for work. So a counselor, therapist, coach, whatever you want to call it, that's who I am. It is not what I do. I just happen to do it too. I am it, and I do it. There are many people in the world, they are this, but they do that. And they can't wait to stop that so they can do this off hours. Or at a party, or when they go on vacation, or they're looking for opportunity to do what comes natural, but they have to do this. 84% of the workforce in America is waiting on their dream job. 84% are doing something they don't necessarily want to do because it's safe and it pays the bills. But how safe is it really? But that's why they do it. Is that bad? No. And some people will do that their whole life and be fine. They're fine. I wouldn't be fine. I did it for 18 years, but always talked about what I was going to do at some point. I didn't know how I was going to get there. And I can remember like 14 years ago saying to my wife about what happened at the job, and I was talking with this family, and they had invited me to breakfast, and they're sharing all their problems, and my wife just looks at me and says, "You need to get paid to talk to people." And I'm like, nobody's going to pay me to talk to them. Like, I didn't understand my value in the world. I didn't see it clearly, like other people could see it. You know, one of the best ways to figure out what you do or who you are or how you're wired or what you value if you aren't sure is to ask the people that know you best. I had an individual call me for coaching. Well, not coaching, one call, debrief. He called off the podcast. He heard me on the podcast. He was from another country. And he was an engineer working in a corporation. And he didn't know who he was or what he was supposed to do. He was very not clear on himself. I told him he was very smart. His theoretical line was a 98. And I said, nobody understands you. And he's like, yeah, all the bosses come to him for information. Like he's an information station. But he was low dominant. So he wasn't using his knowledge to take ground. He just sat there and hoped for it because he was an S, C style. Lower D, lower I, not very verbal unless he had to be, unless he was on a subject he was very familiar with and all that. And I said to him, do me a favor. I want you to draft an email to 15 people that know you fairly well. Do you have 15 people that know you pretty good or really well? He said, yes, absolutely. I said, I want you to draft them an email and ask them, say, I'm doing a social experiment. I would like you to tell me 5 things that you see in me as a human being that are of tremendous value to you. Something maybe so great you would pay for it. And I said, you put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and leave it blank. And you email that out and give them a week to respond. And I thought he was choking up on the phone. He said, I really want to do that. I said, now, but here's the trick. When the information comes back, you're going to have you're going to have like 75 bullet points on your value as seen through the eyes of another person. Will you believe it when you read it? That's the question. I said, you have to believe it. Now, these have to be people that know you and care about you, because those are the truth tellers. And I said, so what we're going to do is when you get that, I want you to send it to me. And I'm going to look at that and I'll put it together and I'll create a structure for you that's going to outline, here's what you're bringing to the world. And he said, I would really like that. And I said, and that's what we'll do. So you're going to look and say, here's value. See, here's the interesting thing. Even in the New Testament of the Christian Bible, in the Gospels, you see Jesus, and he's saying to the disciples, who do men say that I am? Who does everybody say that I am? He didn't go, let me tell you who I am, guys. I got to break some news to you. What does everybody else see is what he asked. Now, if he's doing it to figure out his value, why don't we? Everybody that knows me says, you are in your niche. You are doing what you are. They all see it. Early on, they all encouraged it. I'll never forget, I was talking with an individual before I went into training in behavioral analysis. It was a pretty good chunk of money. I would have to take out an equity line and a loan to get the money to pay for it. And I was nervous because work wasn't like super good right now, just all these things. And I said to the individual that was talking with me, I said, I don't know if my wife's going to go for this. And he said, oh, she will. I go, you don't have her graph. He goes, I don't need it. I got yours. And I said, that's interesting. But I remember telling her, I said, I was trying to figure out how am I going to break the news. This is finally something I really think I should do. I want to do it. It kind of fits me. And I told my wife, you know, this is what it is, and this is what I could do, and yada, yada, and it costs this much. I'll never forget it. She looked at me and said, I don't care what it costs. This is you. I mean, just like that. I don't care what it costs. It doesn't matter what it costs. This is you. And I took that encouragement and then went for it. And I took out a loan like 2 days later and was in training a couple days after that, just from getting that green light. Because when you spot something that's you got you all over it, it does something to you. And some of us, it took me till I was 40 to spot it. because I'm a low compliant, low steady, high dominant, high influence, ADHD, sporadic, bee's nest. So zigzagging through life, moving all over the country, just trying to find out where I'm going, what am I doing, just very like that. That's called a late bloomer. And I say late bloomers bloom late, but they bloom great. So you may be blooming late, but better late than never is the way I like to say it, because that's what happened to me. And I bloomed later. And what's really weird is I just keep blooming. It's like, this is never ending. Every year it's something else, it's something greater, there's another dimension. Why? Because I'm walking in who I am. And as I get older, it's like fine wine, it just keeps getting better. So you need to find out who are you and what are you doing and get into that flow. And it'll be like that. Well, that's it. All right, so